This is WXOJLP Northampton, 103.3 FM, your Valley Free Radio station. Welcome. I'm Warren Odess-Gillette, and this is A Baha'i Perspective. A Baha'i Perspective is a radio program that presents a Baha'i perspective on life through interviews. If you want information specifically on the Baha'i faith, you're welcome to visit the website www.baha'i.org. That's BAHAI.org. Or you can call the toll-free number 1-800-22-UNITE. Today I'm playing an interview with Chet Makoski, a graphic designer that started his career and family in Ireland, then returned to the U.S. and established himself in Connecticut. He joined an industrial design firm in Farmington, Connecticut, and ended up buying the firm with a partner. I started the interview by asking Chet where he grew up, and what was it like growing up there?
Well, I grew up in Cleveland, Ohio.
Okay.
And actually lived in the inner city, in the Polish neighborhoods of Cleveland. I went to Cleveland South in high school, and 75% of the kids in the school were all Polish. And I tell you, I thought that the country was Polish and Catholic. It didn't occur to me that that wasn't the way everywhere was in the United States.
Yeah. Till about what age?
Well, I kind of had a sense that things were different.
You did watch
as
TV.
I got old. I did watch TV.
Yeah.
But as I traveled and left Ohio, I lived in Ohio all my life through art school, and then we moved. I got married and moved to Ireland, and of course living in Ireland and then in New England, where we've been for 33 years. It's a different world,
right?
And it's not like the inner city of Cleveland,
right?
And even that has changed. So,
right. What college did you go to, or what art school did you go to?
I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art. It's one of the professional art schools. There's a group of them that it's a 5-year course to get a BFA. It's a very good art school.
And art was something that you discovered in yourself as long as you can remember.
Oh yeah, I always drew and could paint, and I enjoyed it very much. And so after high school, when I was trying to decide what I wanted to do, I thought, why not do something I really like? And drawing and painting was, the thing that I enjoyed the most. So I said, why don't I make a living doing this?
Yeah. Was there any resistance from your father or mother?
No.
Say, get a real job?
No, not at all. No, not at all. It wasn't a professional family. In fact, I was the first person in the history of my family to graduate from high school.
Oh, wow.
And to go to any kind of after college level training was pretty unusual. And they were just surprised and glad that I guess I chose to do that, but they were always supportive of it. No, they thought it was fine. If whatever I wanted to do, I could do it.
And what was your father's occupation?
My father was when I was in high school, he was a Cleveland Joint Board manager for the Amalgamated Clothing Workers Union.
Okay.
In other words, he was
a union leader.
Was a senior. Yeah, that's right, a labor leader, and he was the senior executive for the state of Ohio for the clothing workers, and he was also a vice president of the Joint Board Bank. And so he would spend a lot of time in New York for meetings. But whenever a presidential candidate would come to Ohio or to Cleveland, my dad was the one who would host him, introduce him. I mean, he was very involved in politics. And in fact, he made many trips, about 7 trips to Israel, because he would work with the the Amalgamated Clothing Workers is a largely Jewish organization, at least in management. And but also they support Jewish organizations and labor programs in this country and raise money and so on. So they would ask him to come to Israel as part of the effort between the labor in the U.S. and labor organizations in Israel. So he actually spent a lot of time in Israel before I ever discovered, that there was a Baha'i faith that had a connection there as well.
I see. And did your father ever give you the opportunity to meet a president?
No, no. He has all these photos on his wall. Had all these photos on his wall of these, all these
great
important
leaders.
folks.
Yeah.
And I remember the Histadrud Jewish labor organization in the United States had a kind of an honoring ceremony for my father, and it was a big event. Hundreds of people in the audience, and the governor was there, and the state senators and Congress people. They were all there, and they gave little speeches about my dad. But that was a part of his life. I never had anything to do with it.
Yeah.
I didn't know about it, and pretty much I was kind of, after art school, gone, and I haven't been in Cleveland, living in Cleveland for 33 years.
Right. Now, what was art school like?
Well, art school was terrific. I entered to become a painter, and then found myself with people who were real painters, and decided that maybe that wasn't the best course for me as much as I enjoyed it. But then I discovered graphic design. I never knew of it. I mean, it was just one of these professions that's invisible. It's everywhere. Everything you read, you touch, movie titles, books, newspapers, objects, packaging. Yeah, but it's all graphic designers do that stuff. Yeah, but it wasn't until I got to art school that I discovered that was a career. And I thought, wow, this is great. I can get a real job and be a designer. And that's what I did all my life, and still do some of that.
Mm-hmm. So after you graduated, what happened?
Art school, I worked for a design consulting firm in Cleveland. It was called Schreckengost, Greenlee and Hess. And in fact, Victor Schreckengost was just a couple weeks ago given the highest award in this country, a congressional award, as where you're a valuable resource, a creative force that has changed things in this country. I got to work with him, who was a genius and a real hero to industrial designers in this country. That was wonderful. That was my first job, and worked there for a couple of years. But then I met my wife. We got married, and we left and moved to Ireland.
So it was more than graphic design then that...
It was an industrial design firm that I joined.
Okay.
And in the firm, I was a industrial design firms, they design products, but when they do products, they also do communications for the product and packaging. Industrial designers aren't trained for that. So industrial design firms also employ graphic designers. So I did the communications, logos, symbols, identities, brochures, and packaging for objects that the industrial design firm developed for companies. Well, there are many things that you've actually used and seen that Victor Schreckengost designed. If kids used to have the pedal cars, he was the first to design those things and made the classic vehicles that children used and really developed them. And bicycles he designed. And in fact, most of us as kids probably rode bikes that Victor Schreckengost designed.
Wow. But
he designed many, many things from utilitarian objects like that, and as well as household goods and industrial goods as well. And in fact, there's been exhibits of his work in museums all over the country, particularly because he celebrated his 100th anniversary. He's 100 years oold this year. He's still alive.
Oh, wow.
And he's 100 years old last year. And so there were exhibits, traveling exhibits, in many museums. And, it was here, it was in Boston and New York and, many places.
Wow.
So it was very nice to start this way with him and his partners. He had two other partners who were also remarkable men and very, very good designers. And so I was delighted to start my career that way. But I was working for an industrial design firm, and I really wanted to do something else, work for... there are firms that are specialized in just graphic design consulting firms that don't do product design. So that's what I really was looking for.
Now tell me how you met Mary Kay, your wife.
I was living in Little Italy in Cleveland.
Okay.
And she was as well. And I was in, it's a neighborhood, very dense neighborhood, where they had a row of houses on the street, and then behind it, what would have been a backyard, another row of houses were built, just to increase the utilization of the space. And so I was living in a house in back. I had two roommates who I never saw. They worked for Penn Central Railroad. And one of them had a motorcycle they left on the west side of Cleveland and asked me to get it for him and haul it back. So I had this big yellow Hertz rental truck. And I got the motorcycle, and I hauled it back to our apartment to store it in the garage. And as I was backing in, Mary Kay was taking out the garbage. We shared a garbage can. And she looked up and she said, "What a big yellow truck." And I thought, what a dumb thing to say. Of course it was a yellow truck, and it was big. It was a Hertz truck. And she invited me up for dinner. She made steak. It really was not very good, but she was terrific, and I liked her right away. She was the funniest person I ever met.
So how is it that that was the first meeting and she invited you to dinner?
Yeah.
Well, you must be a pretty charismatic person. I've never run into a situation where I just met a woman and she just invites me to dinner.
No, I think she must have been bored and pretty desperate. It turned out that she was getting my mail for a year. We've been living there a year and never seen each other, never crossed paths. She was getting my draft notices. And
now, how was she ending up with them?
Well, she lived in the building in front. The post office, the mail delivery person was confused and would put the mail in the wrong building, and then she would find it, and then she'd go put it in my building where I lived, right behind her. So she knew of me for all that time, and also I had a cool car that she saw, a Morgan, a 1959 Morgan, the last of the handmade British sports cars, if you know what a Morgan is. It's amazing. Amazing car. I have models of them. I'll show them to you. I don't own one now, but in any event, that was the car I drove. And so everybody saw that car, and it was very unusual and very distinctive. And so maybe it was my draft notices and my Morgan that made her feel like she wanted to get to know who this guy is.
So you got married soon after? We
did. We were married, I think, within 6 months or so. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then you mentioned you moved to Ireland. Now, what were the motivators to doing that?
I was always attracted to Ireland. Even though I grew up in a Polish family and there's no Irish in our family, I always was drawn to things Irish. Movies, music in particular, stories, literature. Just anything about the country was appealing. And, maybe the most persuasive, I have to admit, the most persuasive thing was the movie with John Wayne, The Quiet Man. And, I just that was my favorite film. It still is. And, when I would see it, I would wonder, now, wait a minute. Here I am in, the Polish neighborhoods of Cleveland, and there's a place like this in The Quiet Man. What am I doing here? Why don't I go there? And I thought, hey, everybody needs designers. I can make a living wherever I go. So I decided to give it a try. And Mary Kay was also interested. In fact, she has an Irish background. Her mother's side of the family is all Irish. So she was willing, and the two of us got married and sold everything, packed our bags, and arrived in Ireland with 4 suitcases, one for each arm, and started off there.
And where did you start in Ireland?
In Dublin.
In Dublin.
Yeah, I wanted to live and work in the west of Ireland, in Galway or Cork. And today you could, but at the time I did this, there wasn't much work there. Everything was in Dublin. Mm-hmm. In fact, any industry you can think of, Dublin was the place to be, and especially for design. There was really nothing in the country. And so anyway, we ended up in Dublin, which wasn't a bad, second choice, because Dublin's a wonderful city. It was then, it is now, and so we lived there for a couple of years.
Mm-hmm. And you moved to other parts of Ireland?
No. I worked for McConnell's Advertising in Dublin, and we never moved anywhere. We just stayed in Dublin. We lived in the foothills of the Wicklow Mountains, about 6 miles out of Dublin, on the 44 bus route. That was my way to work. I didn't own a car. A lot of walking and trains and buses, and it was just great. The best way to get around. And it was a real adventure.
Yeah.
For those 2 years.
So you were in Ireland for 2 years?
Yes.
And then what caused you to decide to leave Ireland after 2 years?
Well, we were there for 2 years, and as much as I enjoyed the work, the quality of the clients and the kind of design work I was doing wasn't up to the demands and the level of work in the United States, particularly with the premier design firms here.
And how did you know that?
Well, you just know it from reading trade literature and observing it. I mean, I was doing it. Had done design in the United States, working with very high-level designers, and I was working in Ireland, and I was working with the top group there, but the budgets were not large enough to support a lot of things you might want to do, and the demand for quality and the pricing, the amount that they're willing to pay to get the work done forced you to do things that were very expeditious, and it was fine, and good work was done, but it wasn't the way I wanted to make my living, and I felt that someday, I would need to be back in the United States to get more experience there, because I was still pretty young, in my mid-20s. The other thing was our daughter was born there. So all of a sudden, we didn't intend to go back originally, and we didn't necessarily know that we were going to have children right away, but our daughter was born 10 months after we were married, and all of a sudden we had a different idea about the daughter being exposed to the family and the family seeing her. It was Sarah, our daughter Sarah. And so we came back in order for us to get access to the family, and she would grow up knowing the family. We just didn't think living in Ireland was the right thing to do at that time.
Right.
It could have been fine, and I think we would have loved it, but we didn't do it. We didn't stay.
And it was in Ireland that you ran into the Baha'i faith?
It was. I never heard of the Baha'i faith in the United States. And we arrived in Ireland, found very shortly Mary Kay was pregnant, and decided as the pregnancy was moving on that breastfeeding was the way to do it, and connected with the La Leche League, who gave us an advisor who turned out to be a Baha'i, Jane O'Brien. And her husband, Philip O'Brien, was an actor and producer. Mary Kay's background, her undergraduate degree was in theater, and so was her graduate degree. It was in theater. So, we intended to go to Ireland, and she was going to work in theater, and I was going to work as a designer, a graphic designer. And so with the baby coming, she couldn't get a job, of course, but we struck it with this couple. Philip and Mary Kay were just terrific together. They knew each other, they understood each other, they understood the literature, they were both trained as actors, they both performed as actors. They got on so well. And Jane and I were the more introverted type, and we got on very well as well. Also, and also that Jane was very interested in natural foods and natural medicine, so that was an interest of ours too, before we went to Ireland, and Mary Kay's in particular. So we just became very good friends with these people, and it turns out they were Baha'is, and we knew them for 2 years, but they never told us anything about this religion. And we, quite honestly, didn't particularly care. We weren't interested. We were Roman Catholic and happy to be so and not looking for anything.
So you were active Catholics, going to Mass and all that good stuff?
Yeah, I would say we were a bit informal about it. I didn't go all the time, but I went to Mass because it was my religion, but also it was part of the culture of Ireland, and to be with the people of Ireland, you need to do what they do, and Mass was an important thing. Also, outside of the church on Sunday morning, with all these tables lined up with all the newspapers, and Ireland is a huge newspaper reading population. Not one paper, but they read multiple papers. When people come out of church, they pick up 1, 2, 3 papers under their arm and spend, lots of hours. They were very well-informed people. And so I just loved that whole atmosphere. Going to Mass, coming out afterwards, getting the newspapers, going home and reading them. I felt like I was being Irish, even though I know it was only superficial. But the experience was a good experience. And so, but we grew up with no problems being Roman Catholic. It's a wonderful religion, and we thought, that's probably what we do with our daughter as well.
How did things develop as you got to know Jane and?
Well, it was really strange. Now, afterwards, we could reflect on it, and it was very kind of odd because, they were very deeply involved in Baha'i things. We go to their home often, every week, and we even went in business with them. I left my design for the advertising agency, and Mary Kay and I set up a business called the Good Earth Trading Company, and we imported natural foods from Belgium and England and sold them in Ireland. And we did this for a number of months, and we did this with Philip and Jane. The 4 of us did it. But they never told us about their religion because we never asked. And we thought it was one of those things you weren't to do. You didn't ask people about their religion. So we didn't pay any attention to it, and they never pushed it on us. We never went to a Baha'i meeting, or they never said anything about what it was about. And then we decided to leave the country, and we dissolved the business, sold our stock to a store in Dublin, And Philip came to our house once. We were packing to get ready to leave, and he said, "How are you going to raise that child? In what religion?" We said, "Well, Roman Catholic. That's what we are." You know, Mary Kay went through all Catholic girls, grade school, high school, and even college in Buffalo, New York. And so, I mean, it was mainstream Catholic. And being in Ireland, of course, it's another Catholic country, and a very Catholic country, in the Republic anyways. But we told them, we said, well, as Catholics, and he goes, well, you know something? We're good friends, we like each other, we're in business together, and you know nothing about our religion. Before you leave this country, can we at least tell you about our religion? And we said, of course you could. We could have done it any time if you had asked. You know? And they never asked, neither did we. So we set up an appointment for 2 days hence to get together. And Philip said he'll put on a pot of tea and he'll tell us about the Baha'i faith. And so we said, fine. It turned out the next day, though, Philip and I had to make a trip from Dublin to Cork to deliver 100 pounds of rice to a store. And we had put it on the train in the past, but it would break open, and by the time it got there was no rice left in the bag. So we decided we had time, we had nothing else to do, and a trip to Cork is a 4-hour drive. It's a pleasant drive. Let's do that. We'll get it there ourselves, and not use the train. And so we did, and we were halfway to Cork, and we ran out of small talk. And I said, hey, you know, we got this appointment tomorrow night, you know, Mary Kay and I, but to learn about your Baha'i faith thing. But why don't you tell me now? So Philip did. And it took him, he's driving the car, and it took him about 20 minutes to give me the fundamental understanding of what, you know, the various religions and the prophets of God who have come, you know, what we call progressive revelation. That was really the main story he told me. And it took about 20 minutes, and I was shocked. I was absolutely dumbfounded. It was like someone hit me over the head with a brick. I mean, I had no idea anything like this was going on in the world, that there were these ideas that Baha'u'llah was, you know, had lived, and that the teachings that he gave, because everything he said to me, word for word, I believed. I thought it was true. And I thought it was the way it's supposed to be. And in fact, most of what he said, I had already come to those conclusions on my own. They were contrary to the Catholic faith, but that didn't trouble me because, you know, as Catholics, you're pretty free. I mean, I grew up with a lot of Catholics in my Polish family, and believe me, they kind of did it their own way. So I kind of always had these ideas that were contrary, but that didn't seem to be a conflict for me. But then again, here was this religion that essentially had in it the basic teachings, which were things I already believed, and didn't know that there was any kind of an organized faith that actually focused on these things. You know, the understanding of what the other religions were. You know, that Christ wasn't the only one that God sent. In fact, even the Catholics know that the Bible, the Old Testament, is full of, you know, revelations from God. And so if that was true and Christ was another, why weren't there others as well? And that was one of the things I thought of. The other thing that struck me was, and this is very personal, but I remember growing up in getting all of the catechism classes as a Catholic and learning the stories of the Christian martyrs. I mean, they were remarkable stories and lovely stories. People whose dedication to their faith led them to, you know, being severely tested and punished and even dying. And so the early Christians, those who became Christian in the early years when Christ appeared, you know, suffered greatly. And imagining and hearing these stories as a kid, I always thought, what if I had lived during those times? You know, there were very few who became followers of Christ, you know, during his lifetime, and then even soon thereafter. Very small band of people for hundreds of years. And I always wondered, would I have been one of them? And I said to myself, I came to the conclusion that yes, I would have.
Oh, really?
There's no doubt. I would have been among those early Christians, regardless of what that would mean to me personally.
Wow.
And but it was a kind of an indulgent attitude, because it's easy to say that, because I would never be tested.
Right.
You know, it
Right.
was thousands of years ago, and I would
Right.
not go through or be put to the test that all of those people went through.
Right.
And then it occurred to me, when I learned of the appearance of Baha'u'llah and his teachings, that I was actually being put to the test.
How's that?
When Christ had come, if I had lived during that time,
Would you have
and someone
accepted
would have
Christ?
told me the
Yeah.
message of Christ,
Mm.
would I have become a Christian?
Right. Or stayed with the conventionality of Judaism.
That's right. Or whatever I might have been.
Right.
And
Or the Romans, for that matter, yeah.
that's right. That's right. And so here I was, as a Roman Catholic, being told that the fulfillment of what the Catholic faith was here to achieve, what Christ came to achieve, has happened, and that Baha'u'llah was the one that we've been waiting for, and that as a good Catholic, my job is to recognize the next step, the return, essentially the return of Christ, which I know is viewed differently by different Christian religions, and the Roman Catholic interpretation of that and understanding of that and teaching of that is also maybe not exactly the way I understood it, but it was the way I understood it. And I always thought that, yeah, Christ would return, but I had no idea that I would be alive at a time when that message would come to me. Mm-hmm. And then I would be able to find out whether my childhood wandering in my mind that, of course, I would become a follower is true or not. And so I accepted it instantly on the spot. So I went from a person of not interested at all to a believer and a member of the Baha'i faith instantly.
Wow. And what was happening on the other side of the with Mary Kay and on the other side of things?
Well, you know, it was funny. We got home. We went. You know, Philip told me afterwards. I don't even remember. It was a blur.
Right.
He says, Chet, after I told you the story, you know, he said, all you did for the rest of the distance to Cork and then the entire 4 hours back again, you just asked questions, and I answered them for you. I just don't remember that. I have no recollection of what happened. I was in a daze. When we got to Cork, we stopped at a home of a Baha'i there who was having gatherings in her home, an elderly woman, must have been in her 70s or maybe even 80s, who was having gatherings in her home every evening to tell people about the Baha'i faith who were interested in knowing, and every night she had 100 people.
What?
Who were not Baha'i. The entire house was filled. Her stairways, people were lined up and sitting on her stairways. At this point, in the early 70s, Ireland was leading Europe in the number of people becoming Baha'i. And this was happening all over Ireland. And so
totally invisible to you.
Totally, I had no idea. I had no idea whatsoever that this was going on. That's right. And so all of a sudden here I was, literally a believer, though not, say, formally, you know, signed up, you know, on the list, the membership list. And Mary Kay, my wife, didn't even know about it. Anyway, we got back. And he dropped me off at the house. I went to Mary Kay, and I said, you know, Mary Kay, on the way to Cork, I asked Philip to tell me about this Baha'i thing. And I said, this is amazing. I can't even tell you what he told me. I don't even know what he told me. But it's amazing. And I'm going to let him, rather than me try to tell you what I thought he said, tomorrow night, he'll tell you. And we'll see what you think. So we went to his house the next night. And sure enough, he put on a pot of tea. And he and Jane were there. And Philip told the story, again, about 20 minutes to Mary Kay. And she was struck by it too. And, you know, it was, it was remarkable. A remarkable story that he told. And the story of the Baha'i faith and of Baha'u'llah is amazing. It's you know, it's funny. I reflect on this and I realized I wasn't interested in the Baha'i faith. But I didn't know what I wasn't interested in. When I learned something about it, all of a sudden, I turned from being disinterested to finding that this was, wow, very powerful and something tremendously appealing. And so knowing something about it, I think, is actually quite valuable for anyone, because then you can decide whether you're not interested or not. Without knowing something, you know, it's hard to know whether or not this is what you would care, you know, to follow.
Yeah. So, you left Ireland a bit different than when you went to Ireland.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. Yeah. Actually, I learned of this in the car. The next night we went to Philip and Jane's house, And then for the next 5 nights, we did something Baha'i every night. Because there's something going on in Dublin. It was a hotbed of Baha'i activity. Every night there was something going on. Deepenings, firesides, gatherings, parties, whatever. And we went from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. And for 5 nights in a row. And then before we left the country, we formally enrolled in the faith, signed a little card. So we got on the membership list of the Irish Baha'i community days before we got on a plane and left. And I have to say, it was a dazzling experience because at that point it was like, why am I leaving? I should stay here. I've learned of something very remarkable from these people, and I'd love to be with them more. But then I figured, well, there's Baha'is everywhere. So we came to New England. We chose New England as the place we wanted to live. And I figured I'd now have to look for work here. So I came and did that.
And why is it that you picked New England?
Well, a lot of people from Ohio actually come east rather than going west, it seems. Maybe because it's within a reachable distance. You can drive from New England to Ohio, where my family was. And Mary Kay's family was in Buffalo. We read a lot of it. When we were in Ireland, we studied places in the United States, and we looked at and ranked places. Our first choice was actually, strange. This is really going to sound strange, but it was Farmington, Connecticut. It was number 1 on our list of places to live. Number 2 was Portland, Maine. Number 3 was Boston. Number 4 was Minneapolis, Minnesota. And number 5 was Denver. So those were the 5 places we chose where we would live or settle when we come back from Ireland. So I looked for work remotely, writing letters to every design firm in the Farmington area, and nobody responded, so I gave up on that. And in Portland, same thing. There wasn't much work in Portland in those days. Now there is, but it wasn't then. Went to Boston, and I found work, and I found very good firms there, and I found 2 firms that offered me positions, but I really decided I didn't want to be in the city. But then I kept hearing about this place in Connecticut. I said, I really want to, I was going for an interview. After the interview, whether I got an offer or not, I would say, hey, you know something? I'm really looking for a firm in the country. And they kept saying, well, there's a firm, a very good design firm in Connecticut. And they said, I don't know where it is. And one said it was called IDC, an Industrial Design Consultants was the name of it. It was an industrial design firm. And I went to the library, Boston Library, to research them and found that they were in Farmington, Connecticut. And of all the firms I wrote to, I didn't write to them because they didn't show up because they were an industrial design firm. All the databases I went to were advertising and graphic design. But being an industrial design firm, they still do graphics. They didn't show up, and so I never wrote to them. And it turned out I phoned them up. They were hiring. I came down, was interviewed, offered a job, and I then worked for the firm for quite a few years, probably about 20 years, and then I bought the firm with a partner. So I've owned the firm for now about over 15 years.
Now, how did Farmington become the top of your list in the United States to live?
Yeah, I know. It's really odd, isn't it? There's so many. Well, I read lots of books about places in the United States to live. Farmington had a number of things. One is more century homes, homes over 100 years old than any town in the United States. So architecturally, and I always cared about architecture. In fact,
if I didn't become, I can understand that.
Well, I actually enrolled to be an architect before I went to the Cleveland Institute of Art. So before I decided to go to painting and then graphic design, I was going to be an architect. And so it's been an interest. And so
what changed your direction?
Well, I enrolled in the University of Cincinnati School of Architecture, and they sent me, just weeks before I was supposed to show up, they sent me the prospectus. And I saw all this science and math, and I thought, oh my gosh, is that what I really want to? I'm good at that stuff, but is that what I want to do?
Right.
And I said, no, I want to be a painter. The romantic notion of the painter living in New York in a loft, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And doing what you want to do.
Yeah, exactly. So I decided, no, to be an architect is going to be too hard. I really want to do something that's just pure spirit, and so painting was it. Anyway, that's how but the architecture of Farmington, from what I read, sounded brilliant, and I wanted to be there. I wanted to live and work in Farmington and be surrounded by this wonderful environment. Also, it was within 2 hours of New York and Boston, and I thought, wow. I didn't want to live in the city or work in the city, but to get access to the cities, What could be better? And then, again, the location in central Connecticut, giving access to Vermont and Maine and all that the New England offers sounded pretty good. It sounded like a great base in order to take advantage of this part of the country. And it turned out to be that. And living in Connecticut has been brilliant. And we do take advantage. Mary Kay and I go all over New England often and enjoy every bit of it. And it's like we're on vacation every week, you know. And the fact that we adopted this place and chose it, and it's lived up to everything we expected, was quite wonderful.
So you lived initially in Farmington?
No, I worked there, but the design firm was there. The design firm now is in Simsbury, but the firm was there for a lot of years in the center of Farmington, and we lived in first we lived in Avon, then New Britain, then Suffield. We were living in New Britain, and Sarah was ready for kindergarten, and we had a son born as well. And we took Sarah to the enrollment for kindergarten, and what we experienced was not at all impressive about the school system, and the way they approached children. They had little airplane candies made out of fuselage was one candy bar, the wing was another candy bar, and they gave you this to the kids when they were enrolling them for kindergarten with the parent. I thought, wait, something's wrong here. I knew enough about nutrition to know this is not what you do with children. And so I was questioning their approach to education as well as the way they treat kids. So anyway, we started looking at models of education in the area and discovered that Suffield, which wasn't that far, had just implemented a couple of years before a new model of education called the ANISA model, which was developed at the University of Massachusetts by Dwight Allen and Don Streets and Dan Jordan, Mag Carney, Patabi Rahman, Beth Bowen. There's a whole long list of people, all Baha'is. And it turns out that the model of education was based on the teachings of Baha'u'llah, though that wasn't well known at the time, because that wasn't something that they would want anyone to know, that a religious philosophy was the underpinnings of it. But nevertheless it was. And the model was fully implemented through preschool through grade 4 in Suffield. And it was working beautifully. And I talked to the superintendent of schools in Suffield, as well as the administrator, the in-service administrator for the ANISA model in the town. And their vision was that each year they would take ANISA one more year. It was through 4th grade at that point when we moved here, and then it would go through the entire school system. And we thought, wow, this is great. What could be better for Baha'i parents to have your Baha'i children go through an education model in the public school system, which is based on philosophy and principles that are absolutely consistent with the teachings of Baha'u'llah. And the town was in love with this model of education. It was a radical departure from anything they had been doing, and there was a lot of excitement about it.
Did you ever find out how they got a hold of the model, how they were aware of the model?
Yeah, the town was dissatisfied with its educational system, and they prized it and valued, there's a lot of interest in the town, the people of the town. There's the town government style, the way this town works, the town meetings. And they weren't happy with the school system. So they decided to shop around looking for models of education that they could implement. And they looked everywhere and did a broad search and discovered this model of education being developed at the University of Massachusetts, the ANISA model. And in comparing it to the others, they were most impressed. And in fact, Dan Jordan and others from UMass came to the town meetings and made presentations to the whole town of this model of education. And the town voted to bring it on. And they got a government grant, a federal grant, that paid half of the cost to implement it. And the town came up with the balance of the other half. So for us to find a town that cared about education that much, to actually determine that theirs wasn't right, and to search for one, and then find one that was consistent with the principles of the Baha'i faith, it was pretty remarkable. Even to this day, people in Suffield and in Amherst and all over New England probably don't even realize that the University of Massachusetts developed a model of education like this. and that this was there was a relationship between the Baha'i faith and the Anisa model that was implemented in the Suffield school system.
Mm-hmm. Do you know where the name Anisa came from by any chance?
It's a Persian word that means tree of life. So the symbol for Anisa was a tree with the leaves bearing fruit. Which being the individual growing and maturing and finding the qualities within them drawn out, and mind, like gems, gems of great value within the child are found and brought to the surface so that the child and society could make use of them. I mean, that's the concept. It's obviously a very, those who are Baha'i know that that's a key concept of the teachings of Baha'u'llah, and that was the way Anisa viewed the child. But they also did something that I think was beyond even just the connection to the Baha'i faith, but the Anisa model attempted to do something that was like the holy grail of education, and that was to find a unified theory of curriculum. No one had ever been able to do it. They still,
It was always very segmented.
Yeah, there's curriculum developed for the physical ed part, for the sciences, for literature, for the arts, and they're all individual and they're developed independent of one another, and they didn't view the child holistically. So no one had developed a philosophy of education, a philosophy of the individual, of a child, and then a philosophy of curriculum in the various branches of knowledge that would unify it all so that the child could be viewed as a single individual and growing and developing, where one branch of knowledge affects the other and the whole child matures and grows at its own rate, so that if a child could take on knowledge and capability rapidly, the school system would allow them to do it. And those children who needed more attention in certain areas would get it, so that the teacher became like a doctor who would analyze the condition of the child and give them what they needed in order for them to then progress to the next stage. And it was all just brilliant, and it worked, and it was wonderful, we thought, and it affected the school system in Suffield remarkably. I must say, all of those who were trained and taught in the teachers as well as the children really had an influence which was quite special and quite remarkable. So we're quite pleased that our children had got exposed to the Anisa in Suffield while it was in those strong early years, preschool through grade 4.
Back to your graphic design firm. You said you ended up buying it with a partner. Where are things at now with your graphic design business? The
firm is there and thriving. It's called Donaldson Makoski Incorporated in Simsbury. We had moved from Farmington to Avon and then last year to Simsbury. But I'm at a stage in my life and my career that it was time for me to exit the firm and let others come in and take it further. And in fact, we just are changing the name of the firm again to the Donaldson Group. And this will be formal and official. My role in the firm is more limited now. I'm exiting from it, and I only spend a few hours a week working for the firm in areas of branding and packaging and identity standards, which is my strength. That's my training at the Art Institute, as well as my career path professionally was focused on those areas. So I'm a resource to the company, but only a limited amount of time a week.
And why is it taking that turn at this time?
Well, two things. One is I'm transitioning out of the business, converting my equity in the business, and it's my time to do that for the benefit of myself as well as for the business. But also, I find that I've been serving the Baha'i faith in many ways, and the Baha'i faith in the United States, as in many parts of the world, are organized and administered by a national body that administers the affairs of the Baha'is in the nation. But then the country is divided into 5 regions, and each region has a council, and the council is made up of 9 people elected democratically through secret ballot. So the 9 northeastern states, New England, New York State, New Jersey, and Pennsylvania, make up a region. Well, I was elected, and my wife and I both were elected to that regional council a number of years ago. And so I've been serving on that council. And I got elected secretary of the council. Now, the council administers the affairs of the faith on behalf of the national administrative body, and there's a lot of work. And the council a year ago decided that the office of secretary needed to be a full-time position, and asked if, since I was serving as secretary, would give up my design business and work full-time for the council. So I've been transitioning, and that prompted me to make the transition as well. It was time for me to do it, but also so it coincided well with the needs of the faith. So for the last year, I've been spending less time with the design business and more time. In fact, I'm full-time with the Regional Baha'i Council right now, serving the Baha'is in 9 states, and finding it to be enormously remarkable, rewarding, and just terrific work.
Well, Chet, thank you very much.
Warren, it was great to be with you and to be able to talk about things that may matter to you and to others.
I hope you enjoyed that interview with Chet Makoski, a Baha'i and a graphic designer. For a copy of this and other interviews, you can go to the website www.bahaiperspective.com. For information specifically on the Baha'i faith, you can go to the website www.baha'i.org, or you can call the toll-free number 1-800-22-UNITE.